here is the exhaust that came off, and I had noticed that it split mostly around the perimeter here, and I've hit this with a wire brush, just a hand brush to clean it up. The only splits and holes I see are up here, and this is helping hold it together. What I'm going to do is I use a muffler putty, and I just did a touch up on this one here. It has a couple little dimple holes. I use this stuff, and it usually will hold a season or a couple of seasons depending on how well a job I do, and then a little more. The idea is with the muffler cold, get it wet, work this in with some gloves, don't get it on your fingers, let it dry overnight, then start and run the bike. But don't run it for a day after this. Sand it down, clean as you'd like there, get it wet, work this stuff in, let it sit. And today, this is how we're getting it wet. Well, it said to do this with the exhaust cold, so I think snow fits the bill. Nice thing is I can wedge this down in the seam. You know, this stuff seemed wet enough without me adding more moisture to it, but that's what it called for. All right, that's it. Just like that, got it wet with some snow, worked it in there with a gloved hand, all in the seam. We're gonna let this dry overnight. We'll inspect it, and we'll probably hit this with some high temp paint to clean it up before we put it back on. But for now, that's one more thing done. Okay, I am still waiting on a case splitter, but now that I have this off the quad in here on some new cardboard, I'm going to see about starting to take off some of the pieces to get further in here. And I'm going to start right here. I'm going to start right here by getting my flywheel and flywheel cover back off. And there is some more oil still down in here. So a little bit at a time. My stator cover gasket is torn up, so I'm going to have to clean this gasket off, put another one in, set this off to the side. This one sits on top here. Inside here is another washer. Inside the basket is a big washer that goes on the back of the centrifugal clutch like that. So that sits in like so. Next, I'm going to look to take the clutch off. I want to take the clutch basket off so I can get at this nut back here, which is the gear side of the counterweight. Spinning to the little detent in the motor, lining it up. I'm looking to get this gear back on. Excuse me, I'm looking to get this pushed out a bearing. I want to get this on and meshed up if I can, hopefully to give myself a little leverage to hold on to, trying to loosen these. 1, 2, 3, 4, should be one more. Ta-da! We do have a retainer on the nut there. We've got to bend that back. There it is. As I pull out this lock, it's interesting. I notice one of the lobes is not there. It's already snapped off. Somebody may have been in here over the years. Set this off to the side. This is what I wanted to get my hands on in here. On this counterweight here. If you can see it, there are 2 marks to line these up. It's important these 2 gears and those 2 marks line up. Otherwise, the lobe on the crankshaft and the lobe on the counterweight shaft, they could hit internally. These are lined up, so that's also not the problem. Somebody didn't open this up and misalign those. A little closer shot of those marks there. Make sure that when you put these gears back together, those 2 marks are lined up. Otherwise, those lobes will bump on the center of the case. Oh boy, oh boy. There's a breakout bar. It's about to get interesting. Oh boy, just nothing happening, which is a little spooky. Not feeling any give. Not good in the motor. That might have been it. Wrapping it with the hammer with the pressure on. There we go. Wow, that was something else there. Woodruff key is intact. This thing was just bound up like the end of the world. Wow. Okay. Flywheel is off. That was more of an adventure than I was anticipating. All looks good. Everything's clean as you'd hope to see it. We'll set this off to the side. Behind the stator, we'll lift this gear off. Big lobe goes out. Let's remember that. I'm going to set this into my flywheel. That's the way it goes. Timing chain looks good. In preparation for splitting the case. Let's see here. Starter will have to come out because it's going across both sides of the case. So I'm going to pull that now. So there's my starter, end of the starter gear, into the starter mechanism. Underneath here I have just pulled 1 and then 2 8mm bolts because the starter is on the opposite sides of the case. This has got to get out of the way for me to be able to split the case. There she is. That rubber gasket seems fine. Put these bolts in here, set this out of the way. I am running out of the way places. You know, there is actually an oil drain plug on the bottom here that I had not seen before. I'm going to try again to get this cover off the worm gear. And at least these 2 bolts are holding that cover in place. So we're going to take off those 2 on this side. Oops. Alright, now I'm going to feed out my shifter shaft. As you can see the way it sits here, this piece, it's kind of catch, sits over the gears that are down in here. And then on this side here, it also sits on a pin when it's all down in there. So if I slide this out, you'll see a little better. So that there catches on two of the gears on this side, and on the other side, right here in this dimple, catches on this protrusion. All of the case screws are 8mm hex head, with the exception of two. You do have to take the cover off of the worm gear for the drive here, because there is a case bolt down in here. This is an Allen wrench, and then there's one more that was down. Oh, it was this one, also an Allen wrench head, and that's the first one I snapped off. A couple of teeth down in the, or threads down the bottom there. I think we're going to be okay though. I'm assuming there's no gasket for this, because this is all, looks to be factory RVT. There we go. This gear mechanism, this comes off, or this meshes with the gear that sits behind the stator, and this just pulled straight out. This is part of the starter gear assembly. Starter gear bites down in here, and then this with the smaller teeth and the bigger teeth mesh with the gear that goes to the back of the stator. Part of what I don't know, split the case. Do I have to undo this bolt, which has got its own lock on it? I'm going to make the guess no, because I see the back side of 4 bolts that I think are probably holding together a gear mechanism. Excuse me, that I think are holding together a gear mechanism on the other side. Got 2 more, looks like 8mm bolt heads here. I'm going to wait to see what those... Oh boy, do I think that those split the case? Well, you know what, if I loosen those, we'll find out how deep they go and if they go to the other side of the case. I'm just going to pull one at a time in case I'm about to drop gears off on the inside. So that does, that also reaches into the other side of the case. Yeah, long case bolts on the inside here. Would have found out sooner or later. And I am continuing to find little broken spring shards. Gotta watch for what that comes from. So I don't see any more case bolts all the way around. I'm waiting on a case splitting tool to come in. When it comes in, we'll go at this again, but for now, I think we're ready. We're just waiting on that tool, and we'll split this, and then we're gonna find out what is keeping this from being able to spin. What is it? We're getting closer, but that's enough for today.